Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Now we'll go to public input from Andy Baker, Deputy Chair at Franklin Local Board, and he'll be speaking about item 8, the Drury Opaheki Pukekohe Paerata structure plans. Andy, welcome.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and just before I start on it, I just want to support Izzy, my great mate, and just in terms of the importance, I guess, of the dark skies, and I noticed they referenced Rodney and Franklin, and there is a marked difference. And as Bill lies out in his backyard in O'Reary Point late in the evening, contemplating life and looks at the stars, it's a damn sight different than when you go over the hill with all of that light spill and things. And so it is something quite special. And, whilst Great Barrier is a little more difficult to get to, there are parts of Auckland where it's actually you can get to and see some quite magnificent things when you do lie back, as Bill does, contemplating life. So just acknowledge Izzy and the work that the local board's doing there. I just want to acknowledge too, as we probably the last time I'll get in front of you people before the end of the term. So thank you as a committee for allowing us to come before you, and as a committee, the whole other committees as well. So thank you, and for those that are retiring, good luck. For those who don't know if they're retiring yet, like me, good luck. And Mr. Chair, you just acknowledge your, I guess, stewardship of the of this structure planning process and that little working group that we had. It was great to be able to continue that. You obviously learnt great things alongside some, and I'm sure Desley will agree, some magnificent chairs of local boards in that first term, and has put you in great stead. So well done, and just acknowledge Bill and his leadership within the community to be able to get here at the time he does in the morning. Stars are still out, and then be able to get out to Pukekohe and to Drury and other places to spend time in the community to talk about this stuff is really, really impressive. So thanks, Bill, for your contribution and things in regards to this and your support of the local board. And then to the staff, to Craig Kencross, to Joy, to Chris, to Celia, and the overall leadership of John Dogood, to be able to achieve under what at first was some pretty tight timeframes demanded by Deputy Mayor Cashmore in this room some time ago, to be able to achieve what is two pretty substantial structure plans, and the way in which that team and the wider team have been able to get out to the community, to spend time listening, explaining. It's so important for people in the community to be able to talk to the people at the sharp end, and who and not rely on people like Mr. Cashmore and myself trying to explain stuff. It's really important, and their effort to be there at halls and cold halls at our beautiful Pukekohe market where the vegetables are fresh and cheap, and talk to people has been outstanding. So I really do want to thank they have been outstanding. We've landed at a place I think that is really, really good. The local board is in full support of what's before you today. We see Pukekohe building on a pretty a substantial existing town in Drury, where I've been living for my entire life, and where my kids are fourth generation there. It's like me when I left the rigours and of boarding school. It's growing large fairly fast, and so we're seeing huge change there. And so seeing that plan for Drury and Opaheki is really pleasing. It's when you put it alongside the future urban land supply strategy and the supporting growth work, on the whole, I think we're doing collectively a really good job of putting in place the blocks from which these little places can grow and change. So it really is a good thing. We a lot of stuff, a lot of talk about things like the centres and things in Drury. They've landed in the right place. We're reliant on investment from government, NZTA, great to see you over there, we're reliant on government investment, and the train stations and the electrification are absolutely vital. The Drury Central, or the Drury train station, and the hopefully soon to be named Runciman train station, reflecting the train station that closed there in 1918. be great to have those things there. And then the next step, I guess, is making sure that as we do the planning, we don't continue the lunacy we seem to be exhibiting at the moment of building narrow roads where people can't park and fire appliances can't make it to the end of the road. So, we'll get that right, I'm sure, as we learn some nasty lessons. But great piece of work. We commend this as presented to you, as the staff have done their great work for adoption, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Andy. Member Hinare, please.
Which one? Just a couple of questions. Do you think that what's before you sorts out future transit routes?
Yeah, so again, that alongside that supporting growth work that's been happening does. It shows the required transport routes, the new routes, the enhancements of what we've got, and the improvements. So yes, I do. But they, as I said before, you've got to read these things together. They're a book set, and we have to read these things together and make sure that we continue that alignment. So some of those things are out of our control.
I worried that there's actually no like future transit routes from let's say airport to Botany. That all of that has not been sort of put in there. I mean, I know it's a big ask, but I would have thought that a proper integrated plan rather than just an island would be the go.
Yeah, I think so there's nothing on the west. You're right, so there's no Weymouth Bridge, Karaka Weymouth Bridge, as we've always talked about, but I think that will come. I mean, the eastern arterial, the Ring Road, the Pukeko Expressway, the Mill Road extension creates that redundancy that's not there at the moment. There's new roads within that supporting growth stuff. And so, which they're in the report somewhere, showing that. So, yeah, maybe it's not the 100% full picture, but it's as far as there's a lot of opposition to a Western Ring Road. It's not something that, we're pretty keen on, but there's opposition elsewhere for it. So it's I think a step.
Other questions? Look, at this stage, Andy, because you are representing the board and the community here today and your support for adoption, I want to acknowledge yourself as being a regular, always there participant on the Working Party. Your chair, Angela Phil-James, as well, not officially a member, but always alongside you. It's been a big task for the Franklin Local Board to engage with its community as deeply as it did in the last few years. And the meetings that have been reported back to me, I haven't attended. That's your charge and the Deputy Mayor's. They have not been lightly attended. They have been well attended. Repeated meetings have been extremely well attended. And your board has made sure that there's been a real, genuine, deep engagement plan. People just don't turn up. They've got to have a reason. And you created the reason, the future shape of the south of Auckland in this area. You gave them a sense that it was going to be formed by them rather than formed exclusively by council. And they turned out in big numbers and came again to the third stage. So what we're about to adopt today reflects that mana whenua and the broader cohesive community response which has been congealed around your Franklin Local Board and your leadership. So thank you. Please convey that, I think, on behalf of all of us back to your board. But Andy, particularly you, because you were charged by your board to helm it. Thank you. Deputy Mayor, would you like to move? Deputy Mayor will move. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Cooper, thank you. And we are offering our thanks to Andy and the local board. We'll just make sure that the words reflect the local board as well. And all those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Thank you. Next item is extraordinary business. I feel obliged to, not so much obliged, but it's only, you have to do this once a year. Under this item, I will congratulate Councillor Stewart for her birthday. An extraordinary birthday.
We're all going backwards.
No singing, but at the lunch break, I think we'll acknowledge Councillor Stewart's birthday today. Congratulations. There we go. That's the way to use extraordinary business. We'll now go to item 8, and that is the Drury Opehiki and Pukekohe Pairata structure plans that Andy has just offered support for. And we'll now hear from our staff. We've got John Duguid and Craig Cairncross, who's been at the helm of this, and we've got Christopher and Joy. Welcome, team.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mayor and councillors and members of the Independent Māori Statutory Board. This is a very big occasion for council, in particular for ourselves as the Plans and Places Department who've led this structure planning work. Craig Cairncross on my right, one of our team leaders who's been having technical oversight of the project, of these projects since going back 2 years. Chris Turbot and Joy Lenors, who led Drury Opehiki and Pukekohe Pairata structure plans respectively. So I'll hand over to Craig shortly, who has about a 10-minute presentation just to give you a real sense of what these structure plans are all about, the work that's been done in terms of engaging with communities, mana whenua, key stakeholders. There are some major landowner developers in this area now. They probably weren't, they weren't present 3 or 4 years ago, but they've seen a big opportunity, particularly in the Drury Opehiki area, for Auckland to grow and the creation of new communities in the southern part of Auckland. So this work goes back to the first Auckland plan, where Drury Opehiki and Pukekohe Pairata were identified as areas for future growth and expansion of Auckland. And then with the unitary plan, the areas were zoned future urban, and that set the wheels in motion for the structure planning to commence. The actual structure plan work didn't commence until 2 years ago, I think just under 2 years ago. So in less than 2 years, Council has, we've got to the point where there are 2 major structure plans in these areas ready for your consideration and hopefully adoption today. And just in terms of some key statistics, in the northern structure plan areas, so in the last 3 years, Council has, you have adopted the Warkworth structure plan and the Whenuapai structure plan. So Warkworth and Whenuapai in the north and northwest plan to accommodate 45,000, approximately 45,000 in terms of population and 16,000 jobs. So those are the northern and northwestern structure plans that have been adopted in the last 3 years, Warkworth quite recently. In terms of Drury Opehiki and Pukekohe Pairata, we're looking at plans that would accommodate, just get the total figure here, population of getting close to 100,000 additional people accommodated in these 2 structure plan areas, which is roughly 10% of the forecasted population growth for Auckland over the next 30 years. So this is big, significant stuff, and approximately 17,000 jobs. So these are areas for significant growth, building on all the growth in the existing urban areas and the 2 northern structure plans that have already been adopted. So, and overall, essentially this brings planning for over half of the future urban areas in Auckland to a conclusion in terms of the structure planning. There are obviously key steps to take the structure plans forward in terms of the funding and delivery of infrastructure is one of the key aspects that you'll hear from Craig in his presentation. but to have this planning completed and brought to you is really something that we're very pleased to be able to do. So without further ado, I will hand over to Craig, who will just talk you through some of the details for approximately 10 minutes, as I said, on Drury Opahiki and then Pukekohe Pairata. Thanks.
Thank you, John, and good morning, Mr. Chair and committee. Now with me is Christopher Turbot, who is technical lead for the
John, would you turn your mic off, please?
Drury Structure Plan Area, and Joy Lenore's technical lead for the Pukekohe Pairata Structure Plan Area. Both able to answer any queries, particularly any deep dives. Right, now, so just looking at the area, Pukekohe Pairata, around about 1,300 hectares of future urban zone land. Around Drury, around about 1,900 hectares. The yellow is the future urban zone land. Where are we pointing? There we go. The next images of the future urban land supply, and the different colours there represent the development ready phases, which I'll show you in a minute down there in the key. Different phases around Pukekohe Pairata. So development ready, as shown there, different periods. The northern part of Drury West there, shown as the first half, decade 1, 2018 to 22, and the balance of Drury 28 to 32, development ready in future urban land supply terms. Pukekohe is a little different, showing there as 23 to 27 in terms of being development ready. By way of context, as I say, around about 1,300 hectares around Pukekohe Pairata. Population around about 30,000. I think we're waiting on the census results, but that's the best we can do for now. Generally surrounded by mixed rural and rural production. The eastern rural urban boundary was defined by the Runciman countryside living area where that little star popped up. And to the south, the Waikato, just to the south of our area. We're right on the border down there. Live zoned, former Wesley special housing area up the top there, now Pairata Rise, selling well. State Highway 22 runs through from Drury down through Pukekohe. I'll just go back and show you again there. And then East Street out to Bombay, that's another mill road. North Island Main Trunk Railway line running through the area. Turning now to Drury, key features just south of Papakura. State Highway 1, of course, being right next to it. North Island Main Trunk Railway, a couple of arrows showing it there. Transpower's National Grid coming up from the dams on the south, shown in the brown line there. Drury Township itself, a small centre on the railway line, and I guess a big industrial area around there. And of course, State Highway 22, Karaka Road, goes through to Pukekohe. Sorry, Karaka Road goes through to Pukekohe. We take our guidance from Appendix 1 of the unitary plan. When we do structure planning, it lays out what we have to do and what we need to look at. There's a couple of messages to leave you with today. Structure plan is the appropriate foundation for the plan change process required to rezone land. So it isn't the rezoning of the land, it's the work you do before. And also more detailed work typically takes place between the adoption of the structure plan and the notification of the plan change itself. So there's a couple of key messages on structure planning in its place. We pick up on work done a few years ago, and Andy Baker referenced it there, the Pukekohe Area Plan in 2014. We took a look at some early possible zones for the future urban zoned area at the time. So an early look at possible zones. Also picking up on TFUG work from 2016, Transport for Future Urban Growth, no acronym, sorry. Just by way of a process overview, so August 2017, September 2017, background research into consultation phase 1, September, October. Consultation phase 2, about a year later. Reporting back to the public, of course, as we go through the consultation phasing. Phase 3, April this year. Preparing and updating the plans as we go, responding to the feedback and getting hopefully, working with the mana whenua along the way. There's been a series of hui, I'll talk about those again in a minute. And of course, checking in with the political reference group along the way, which has been a very important part of the process. And we hope to get through to adoption today. By way of an overview, so our direction came in August 2017 from the Planning Committee to get on the structure planning for these two areas, plus the two northern areas as well, Silverdale and Warkworth, but I haven't talked about them. 2017 reporting issued, feedback in 2018, the next edition of the report's coming out in 2018. Constraints and opportunities examined along the way. Pukeko flood risk, looking at some of those areas of, I guess, higher risk areas of flooding, how it might affect our advice. Ecosystem and ecology, taking specialist reporting input. There's not a lot of natural remnant bushland and ecosystem left there, so we're looking more for opportunities in the structure plan. And Pukeko Paurata landscape advice, Opus in this case provided some good landscape input into the process, and I've just sort of circled a couple of tough rings. Volcanic is a volcanic landscape, so it's definitely a feature of the area. Business land advice along the way, so we had property economics and also MR Cagney, who peer-reviewed property economics, recommending a certain amount of light industry zoning around Pukeko Paurata. Input from Watercare, timely input, looking at what bulk supply improvements would be required for water and wastewater. And then also Katarina Markey's team advising us on community facilities. And of course, this is, if you like, a start, further work to do. It's a 30-year structure plan, 30-year plus possibly, so, you know, continued review as we progress. Open space needs, so a range there shown for Pukeko Paurata around 30 hectares to 53, and a range of different types of parks indicated as being required. Not all at once, again over 30 years, so you know, quite a number of neighbourhood parks, suburban parks, local centres, etc. Turning now to Drury, you look at that map and you can see that, I guess, the predominant features of the landscape there, which is those sort of floodplains from the different creeks in the area, Oira Creek, Ngakaroa, Hingaya, Slippery Creek or Otawairoa, up near Opahiki. Again, not a lot of native remnant vegetation, so again we look at opportunities, what can we do, how can we make it, provide some good opportunities for sort of walkways for human use, but also for ecological purposes as well. Again, water care input, water supply upgrades required, wastewater upgrades required. Business land, MR Cagney, property economics again, so we use them for both projects, advising us of around 135 hectares of light industrial zone plus some centre zoning. Again, community facilities, forecast growth. I think the key part there is further consideration to come as you progress through the 30-year time frame. It won't stop just because we've got a structure plan and we move into the next phase as well, which is the plan change. So yeah, I talked about those opportunities in Drury in particular where there's not a lot of existing remnant native vegetation, but there is opportunities to make something of those watercourses, those floodplains, those streams, and good opportunities there. Parks and reserves, so we've got a figure there of around about sort of 76 to 85 hectares required over that 30-year time frame. Quite a few neighbourhood parks, quite a few suburban parks, as shown there. 35, 2 and 6, different types. Working with Mana Whenua has been a key part of this project. We started right at the very beginning, and it's been a great process. We've had 19 hui to date, and ongoing, I suspect, in terms of the relationship and working through the next phases of the project. Regular progress briefings. We had a room in Pukeko that we always use as a kind of working room, posters up on the walls, maps we could leave there, and a regular place we could stop in at. They sometimes requested expert representation from Healthy Waters or ecologists or transport people. Please come and see us so we can ask you questions. So we got them along as required. So it's been a great process, and we've enjoyed working with Mana Whenua, a key part of this project. Urban design input along the way. We've worked up a neighbourhood design statement to provide us with guidance on urban design issues and considerations we must give thought to. Key connections, just showing you some sort of concepts there really. permeable street network, fine grain block, looking at where the intensity should be, the density and intensity, and also diversity of use being TOD, transit-oriented development, being a key part of our ethos, if you like, for the centres. Further investigations looking at a finer grain detail down through arterials, collector roads and also local roads, so a bit of sort of zooming in or deep dive, if you like, in terms of the roading, potential roading network, movement network. So into 2019 now, summary reports went out in, sorry, just before that, summary reports in April, but just before we got the integrated transport assessment from the Support and Growth Alliance, which was Andy referenced before, the alliance between NZTA and Auckland Transport, Auckland Council playing a part in that too. So it provided us with an in-depth piece of analysis around the transport network required to service our two areas. So it was done as one, covering both areas. So I'll just show you a few key features on the slides to follow. The ITA, that's an acronym for the Integrated Transport Assessment. Pukekohe North, looking at the expressway, potential expressway, State Highway 22 expressway, with connections also through to the existing State Highway 22, which I think if I had a pointer, there we go. So those connections going through several places to the yes. I can only do one side. Sorry. Pairata Pukekohe, roading arterial roads, Eastern Arterial Expressway, down through Grace James Drive, down to Golding Road and south to Buckland, just shown there by that arrow, and then the Western Arterial as well around Heights Road, and then up to State Highway 22, Gun Club Road, Heights Road, State Highway 22. So those are two kind of key arterial elements to the Pukekohe area. Public transport wise, well, you've got a railway line, don't you, running through, and you know, new service improvements there in terms of regularity. A new Pairata station shown in the Supporting Growth ITA, and also in terms of buses, looking at those connector or local road bus network, servicing the stations, supplying the stations with buses and people to ride on the trains, I guess. Yeah, Drury West, looking at Drury Central Station, and also a Drury West Station, named to be finally determined. We had some advice there before, but I won't go near that topic. Pukekohe Expressway, just showing the sort of northern end of that expressway, and the collector road network also. So the SGA, the ITA, dive down fairly deep into looking collector roads, which is a bit getting down to a bit of finer grain. Drury East, Mill Road alignment, couple of options still shown on that map that we had at the time. Mill Road, positioning there is of great interest to people, and there's been a lot of communications going out from the Support and Growth Alliance recently around sort of the beginnings of route protection, the process for it. Collector Road alignment as well, collector road network as well. Public transport, two stations identified by the Alliance, Drury Central, Drury West, and also a frequent bus network route, Jesmond Road, heading up Jesmond Road and then across State Highway 1. Now, I think there's been some improvements recently, and I guess more work to follow as NZTA kicks in big time. And also an Eastern Arterial, which, yes, funnily enough, is just to the east of the existing railway line. So that's another arterial road shown in the ITA provided by the Alliance. Active transport network, looking at the cycling and walking. 3 levels were described to us, regional and primary, main cycle connections, all important stuff. So it's a balanced look at transport. It's not all about roads, it's not all about trains and buses even. It gets down to that active transport consideration as well. And also local, looking at the local level in terms of local trips able to be achieved through neighbourhood streets where possible. So bearing in mind we're looking at the future urban zone, the yellow colour if you like, and not so much the existing zoning, not the existing urban zoning, but our remit's the future urban zone. So, and that's how the Alliance have worked up their transport planning, which synced in with our planning work, pure planning work, if you like. So into April, out came the sort of summary reports there. April 2019. Engagement's been a very big part of this process. We've had 3 phases of engagement. Andy and John's talked about it earlier, so I won't repeat it too much. 2018 worked in sync with the Supporting Growth Alliance, who went out also with, so it was a sort of dual engagement process. And then more finally in April this year, the draft structure plan for both areas. So yeah, big turnout in the cold country halls of our area, and also some of the warmer ones as well by the end of the night. Good attendance by local members and local board councillors as well, so thank you for that. It's been great working with them. Many hundred attending. Sometimes these numbers slightly underrepresent because, you know, you get groups and only one of them sort of signs for a group, so I can safely say many hundred turned up to most of the events. Great working with the local boards as well. We checked in several times, advisory, and members also on the political reference group from both Franklin and Papakura, so it's been great working with the 2 boards along the way. Feedback each time, so we fed back every time we went out. We fed back, you know, a few months later on what was said and what was received, and I guess what further work to do. So there we go, into the final structure plan for Pukekohe Pairata. And I guess Joy could talk about details in a minute as required. There's some statistics or the mix of dwellings, population and jobs, showing the residential, local centre, light industry and kind of totals along the bottom. Over 30 years. Juri Opaheki Centre is a big part of that sort of process, looking at a large main centre being required. Proposed location for the centre shown close to and east of State Highway 1 around Juri Village itself as it is at the moment. And in the west, to the west of State Highway 1, being the west, and so this is shown near Jesmond Road and primarily serving the western part of the Juri structure plan area. So additional smaller centres also shown on the plan and located to service local areas. The number, position and scale of these is subject to ongoing refinement. As I showed back on that early slide, there's work still to be done. In the structure plan report, as outcomes are specified in terms of what's expected for the different hierarchy of centres, so the bigger centres down through to the smaller neighbourhood ones. So there's the Juri structure plan map for 2019, and that's the one showing some detail there. We've adopted the approach, I guess, utilised for Warkworth, which is slightly rounded boundaries rather than sort of strictly following the kind of property boundaries. So we've shown the unitary plan colours and showing detail there in terms of centres. Centre zone there, that's our western centre, and centre over there on the eastern side, if you like, a bigger main centre, plus industrial business land up there, and also just south of the existing boundary road kind of industrial area in Papakura, and a little bit there down the bottom near where the kind of bottom end of Mill Road comes out as well. So, and in terms of density, high density around the station, so that's that western one there, and that's that central one, if I can find it, there it is, just south of Waihoiho Road. That's Waihoiho Road there. And density sort of decreasing as you progress outwards, sort of gradated outwards, if you like. Right, next slide. Next slide. Bit of freeze up there, Sandra. Are we back? Yeah. So there's some numbers that were generated by Christopher and the team. Estimated houses. So looking at the net land area, so you're excluding the roads, you're excluding the floodplains, and of course floodplains are a big part of that Opaheki area in particular, and looking at obviously allowing for roads and parks and streams and In general, Bull Park leaves around 45% of net developable once you take out that stuff, and I think it's even lower up around Opaheki. There we go. So staging and infrastructure funding. So Appendix 1 of the Unitary Plan requires both a staging plan and a funding plan as part of the structure planning. So work on that is not complete, it's ongoing. There's a joint work program between council and central government agencies to address that, and this will address both the staging and the funding, and includes a jury preferred transport network investment program. So until that's landed, there's several months of work ahead in that regard, and I think Anna and Penny will talk about that a little bit more in an item to come. The future urban land supply strategy will apply. So a staging plan and a funding plan can be attached as addendums at a later stage. So that's what we're seeking, adoption for the two structure plans. So thank you very much. As I said, Christopher and Joy and myself possibly can answer some questions, if any.
Thank you, Craig and the whole team. It's been quite a journey. Deputy Mayor Cashmore, you will move. I'll second the adoption. And questions at this stage. Councillor Kathy Casey, please.
I'd like to go and see it all. I was trying to think of the last time I was down that way. I don't live there. I think it was the special housing areas, or it might be in the Monga Authority, but we certainly haven't been down recently. So hopefully when we all return to the new council, you can take us down there and show off your plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wayne Walker.
So, got a few questions. I was part of the working group. So, around the issues of inundation, especially as it goes to climate change, given the incredibly flood-prone nature of much of this area, are we going to take a scenario approach in terms of the release, so that we're prioritising the stuff that's higher up as compared to the stuff that's lower down? And the reason that I'm asking that is that everything points to worst case scenario in terms of ice melt, that sea level rise, and we know that it is inevitable that we're talking about many, many, many metres. So can you respond to that around the release? And I know that's not strictly the structure plan, but the structure plan then interacts with other documents and approaches.
Yeah, so in terms of inputs from Healthy Waters, we've been provided with the best available data that they've been able to provide us in terms of sea level rise, making allowances for sea level rise. In terms of the staging, as said, there's work still to come in terms of staging. Now, look, a lot of that's sort of infrastructure driven, the funding and, you know, methods of achieving it and what should inform the staging. But as part of the kind of long list of issues, if you've read the attachment in terms of the structure plan report, there's a lot of stuff still to do in terms of consideration. So by the time we get to the plan change, the sequencing, staging, and then into the plan change provisions, I'm pretty sure we can make sure we tackle it to the best of our abilities in terms of covering that risk item or that issue. Christopher, did you want to?
Thank you, Craig. So, as Craig said, we get advice from Healthy Waters, who in turn employed consultants to revise all the flooding and inundation layers that apply to both Drury, Opaheki and Pairata and Pukekohe. So those have all been updated, taking into account current predictions for climate change, and that includes increased rainfall in the hills and the Hanuas and other hills at the back of Pukekohe, which causes a consequent increase in the floodplain. So that's all been taken into account and is shown on those maps. So we have addressed that.
At what point do we advise people that their properties are going to be underwater over a time frame? Do we advise people of that and the people that are engaged in this development process?
So as that information's verified, it gets placed in the council's GIS system, and when people apply for a building permit or a resource consent, that information will become apparent to them, or they can go online, look it up. So it is actually implemented through those stages.
Sure. I mean, I appreciate the short term, but in the medium to long term, a lot of this area is going to be underwater. So everybody knows that.
So those blue areas that are shown in the maps
Sure.
there show the current state of knowledge, and that knowledge will get updated as we go forward over time if this new information comes through.
Okay, the other question I've got surrounds sedimentation. Quite obviously, we've got soils here that are prone to erosion. That's acknowledged in the documents, and a lot of erosion along the rivers and the streams and the creeks. Are we proposing to adopt a higher standard? And I'm referring to the circumstance that we've got around Long Bay, Okura and the like, where we're sharpening our game. And I'm mindful that we've got an estuarine environment here that's very, very prone to sedimentation.
Yes, Councillor, that very issue is addressed in the Stormwater Management Plan, which is one of the accompanying documents to the structure plan, and it indicates erosion risk from streams as a significant matter that will need to be dealt with in the future, and the way that will be dealt with will be in the plan change rules that are still to come. We probably will need a higher standard than we have historically used, and that is clearly a matter for the future plan changes to address, but the structure plan identifies that as an issue that will need to be addressed. The structure plan itself is not a regulatory document.
The other question I've got on the Pukekohe structure plan, is it appropriate to ask that question now? So in Pukekohe, we don't appear, from what I can see, certainly in the priorities, and I'm looking at key outcomes, to be making any mention of not just the special nature of the soil, but the special nature of the growing environment, which is both the soils, the frost-free nature, the proximity to the Auckland markets, an area that, frankly, is the most important food bowl in New Zealand.
Can we just address that, because that was well covered in our workshops, and
I don't see it in the key outcomes.
Deputy Chair Andy raised that repeatedly.
Well, I think the key point to make about the future urban areas in the Auckland plan adopted by Council last year and in the unitary plan is that that balance between enabling Auckland to grow, not just in the urban area but also in some of the greenfields, does mean that some of the soils will be compromised, but there are significant areas, in fact the vast majority of all high-class prime and elite soils are outside of future urban land. By far the most significant proportion is well outside that. So that strategic decision was made by Council in identifying these areas as future urban. Once they're identified as future urban, the opportunity to then protect the soils from development is foregone. But I think the key message is that the vast portion of Auckland's elite and prime soils are outside of the future urban areas, outside of these structure plan areas.
So just on that, we discussed this in our working party a lot, and we went back and we looked at those prime and elite soils that were protected, and the Franklin Local Board, to give them credit, was pretty fierce in their determination in the unitary plan process to not see further creep onto those elite soils. This current board and the former board is definitely not responsible for the carving up of the Pukekohe Hill. That was the former district council, and we have not eroded that area through the structure plan.
Yeah.
You've got to ask 4 questions.
Sure. So my issue is that in the key outcomes, we don't make any mention of the critical growing environment that Pukekohe is. There are soils and there are elite soils that are in areas that are going to be developed. That doesn't mean to say that that soil is not a resource and should not be saved. That soil could be transferred to somewhere else within the catchment so that it's not lost. So my concern is that we really do need to prioritise these values, and they should be in the structure plan, because much of Pukekohe is elite soils and an elite growing area.
Thank you. Miguel, please.
So,
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My question is in relation to the impact of Drury Opaheki and the centre development there on the area that we've zoned as a metro centre, which is Papakura. The Deputy Mayor and I and Councillor Newman were at a meeting of the Papakura Business Association last week, and there was a real question, and it's reflected in this paper on section 32, I think it is. What will be the impact on Papakura, which has been sort of bypassed a little in terms of development, of the new Drury development? And the debate, I suppose, went around, you know, Drury could help the emergence of Papakura as a metro centre, but it could also detract from it. And I just wondered how much your planning had taken into account what the relationship between Papakura and the Drury Opaheki development would be.
I mean, it's certainly come up in our advice from experts and also in terms of our general planning, looking at the population potential growth for the area, which is, you know, sort of circa 60,000 over 30 years. There's opportunity there, I think, for supporting the Papakura centre as it is, with, you know, further growth of population, but also the need to service the local needs for the people that move into the area, both west of the motorway and east as well. So it's certainly been a matter of some consideration, but we look at those numbers and, you know, the size of sort of Hastings or Napier or Rotorua or something like that in terms of eventual populations is pretty big. So we see there's being opportunity for Papakura to kind of capitalise or optimise off the back of that as well. Christopher, did you want to add?
Thank you, Craig. So the projected area of Centreland has been prepared with the input of a professional economist to base that on the future population to come. So it should always be proportional to population rather than just putting a big new centre in with no new population. The other point to think about is that as this area grows in the future, it'll create new jobs, and those jobs will be accessible to the existing Papakura residents who'll be able to get to these areas within quite a short travel distance and travel time. So potentially 12,000 new jobs in the future over 30 years that existing or future Papakura residents will be able to access. So there's potential opportunity for those Papakura residents as well as the new population to come.
Just a supplementary on that, thank you for that. I think there is that huge potential there. And as I understand it, Papakura is zoned, it can go up to about 12 stories in the metro centre area. Now, a lot of that may depend on the owners of the land and the potential developers of the land, but is there any other role that council might be able to play in order to facilitate that development? Because you're quite right, Drury's only literally 10 minutes away from Papakura, and that would enable Papakura to grow, but is there any incentivisation that council can create to encourage that to happen?
Well, the Papakura Local Board's doing some pretty wonderful things at the moment in terms of looking to support development in the metro centre, including encouraging development where the sort of development parcels allow it, high density residential. There was a launch the other night of the latest initiative, which was, you know, well attended. I got bumped off the list, but never mind. I hear it was good.
You were well represented there.
Good. Okay. So through the work that they're doing with the group that's chaired by Lee Orton, they're very much focusing on how can we make this place successful, how can we build it, how can we optimise on the growing nature of the area. And I think part of that work will kind of spread across into how do we optimise, how do we pick up the most benefits from this wider growing area around Drury Opaheki. Let's see how the staging unfolds over the next 8 to 10 months with the infrastructure consideration, you know, being at the top of everybody's mind and funding for it. But, you know, I can report that there's very good work being done, and I've got great confidence in the local board and the group that they've set up to push hard for the best outcome for Papakura.
Thank you, Mayor. Craig, I wonder if we could just touch on a few touchy points here that did come up in the working party, and one of them was about the location of centres in our most recent working party, we saw a multi-criteria assessment of the various locations analysis, and then also the train station. So at the moment, the Drury West train station is this long sausage, and of course it won't be that long ultimately. It will be in a more specific location. So I'm wondering if you could just take us briefly through some of the testy things that we had to deal with in terms of the rapid transit solutions, because we have always said this is not going to be a car-dependent a host of communities that develop out of these structure plans through to plan changes and then into delivered housing and employment. And if you could conclude by just saying, from a structure plan, when you move into plan changes that come out of this, how things can be further refined. I think we know that structure plans are not set firmly in concrete. They're a non-statutory guide to the statutory process. So just wanting to get a sense that on some things, there's some good evidence and really clear direction, and maybe on some other things we will learn a bit more and then arrive at the plan change process and we can refine better.
We prefer to call them ellipses rather than sausages for the stations, but just in terms of further detail, in terms of the process, looking at the Western centres, Christopher's probably best placed to advise on that, if that's okay. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The map up there shows the centres that we've proposed in that sort of pinky colour. They're not actually given a specific centre zoning yet, because that level of refinement will come at the plan changes, and as you can see they're in a kind of rounded disposition. So further refinement of the exact position and scale of those centres will occur during the plan change preparation processes. In Auckland, in general, we have a hierarchy of centres, with centres forming different functions from metro centre, town centre, local centre, neighbourhood centres. So we've gone through a 3-year process looking at alternative options for those centres and getting advice on the level of future population they need to service. We think they need to service about 60,000 people in this immediate structure plan area, plus a much wider catchment that extends to, well, even as far down as North Waikato, potentially. So there's potentially scope for at least one quite large new centre in Drury Opeheke, and we looked at different positions for that and eventually settled on the position that's shown there, which is just east of State Highway 1, and you can see there's a station ellipse or sausage right next to it. And while we're talking about stations and train networks, I'd also like to point out that the supporting growth concept includes 3 new frequent bus networks travelling north-south. One is on the existing Great South Road, one is on an upgraded State Highway 1, and the other's on a new arterial corridor to the east. So it is a multi-dimensional public transport network proposing. So that big centre on the east connects to both the new Drury East railway station and the frequent bus network. Moving over to the west side, in the pink there we have a reasonably large centre proposed on State Highway 22 near a station, which is that black ellipse, and there is also a frequent transport network running up Jesmond Road and across Bemner Road to the west of the bus network. So to select that Western Centre location, we went through a multi-criteria process that looked at 5 locations, 3 in that general vicinity there and 2 further to the west. And that multi-criteria process looked at a number of factors, including commercial potential, residential, densification potential, ecological effects, among some of those things, or business co-location potential was another one. And basic locations further to west along State Highway 22 had a good residential potential, however they had a poorer business potential. We narrowed the choice down to 3 options, all in and around Desmond Road, State Highway 22 intersection. And after considering various advice and input, optimised the location for business potential in conjunction with a railway station to create a transit-orientated development, and to ensure we can service the upcoming growth to the north of Drury and connect to the frequent transport network so that area is accessible to all business destinations to the north by both train and by bus network, and that area, that centre can be accessed from that frequent transport network without people having to drive or get in their cars to get to their centre, which is particularly important for the areas. And North Drury West, which are under development now. Does that answer your question?
I think you've addressed the process that was gone through and the working. It's fair to say, members, that this was examined pretty hard at the working party, and there are probably still some questions in people's minds that they are continue to reside in my mind on this. But the ellipse, the sausage, that will shrink as you move into your next stages of work and refining things, I gather.
Yes, the ellipses, the one in the Drury West area, at the bottom of the page there, that's a little bit longer than it needs to be because there's still some more work, technical work to be done on the exact position of the railway station. There are a few little technical challenges to do with floodplains and streams and deciding how close it needs to be to the new Aotearoa Road, and there's still more work to be done on the exact position of that Aotearoa Road. But these stations will be 220 metres long or thereabouts to service the 9-car trains that we anticipate will be coming eventually every 5 minutes on this network.
And look, there's pros and cons on these things. There's no perfect solution. It's a difficult task, and I know that the location that you have put the western one in connects with the industry land by about 500 metres, crossing the water. We'll cross that somehow with walking and cycling and road routes. The other point was there was also a lot of emphasis in creating jobs that actually anchored people in the south, rather than created a dormitory suburb and they were on the motorway network, going north for other employment. But I think it's fair to say that we don't expect everybody to be working in this area. There will be people on the move, but the deliberate move here is to move them by rapid transit in the first instance, by frequent transit, and the last would be probably by private motor vehicle with a single occupancy. So I note that for every dwelling here, we're creating about half a full-time job, which is a job demand which is less than what most households demand. So I think we need to, and maybe this is a question, do you think we're being transparent and upfront about it not being a dormitory suburb, but if people do need to move for earning and learning, they are going to be given those public rapid transit connections at the outset, not something that comes 10 years down the track once they've bought their Toyota Hilux.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of the Supporting Growth Alliances work, that's very much an ethos which underpins, they're working with us along and have done all the way along, and the use of public transport, in particular railway stations, to move people, to their jobs, either very close for local jobs or further afield to Manukau and beyond, Papakura and beyond, remains. They're doing continued work, we're doing continued work. I guess it's just worth noting in terms of where you get the most amount of jobs, which of course is in centre zones, and so there's balancing our professional advice in terms of size of centres and impact, if you like, but also we propose a fair extent of industrial business land, which might look like the Upper Harbour sort of industrial, higher end industrial, or Highbrook, something like that. Or it could be sort of that heavy industry up around Opaheki, which is a bit more kind of, well, heavy industry really, kind of not quite Penrose, but hopefully better. And this all creates jobs, and I guess there's the potential also for council's other units, John Norman and the local crew to kick in there in terms of economic development, incentivising. I mean, as the members are aware, there's the hunt on for a Southern Hospital location somewhere there, and we're kind of going, oh, how about us? Drury looks good, it's on the railway line. So there's all sorts of opportunities for those kind of institutional land users to move in there as well and create more jobs, and perhaps our yield analysis suggests is possible. And we're all encouraged, an encouragement of that. We certainly support that. So,
Thank you.
Sorry, just to add to that, I mean, the structure plan document does emphasise the importance of having significant employment in these areas, and also the importance of it being a public transport-led solution to the transport needs of the developing communities. And the structure plan does need to be read in conjunction with the Supporting Growth Alliance documentation, which explains all of that transport network in far more detail than would be necessary. But I think the key messages are there in the structure plan, that it has to be a public transport-led solution, and that there has to be significant employment in this area.
Councillor Newman.
Good morning and thank you. My prediction is that probably between 70 and 85% of movements of people will be by private motor vehicle in this location. I think the private motor vehicle is always going to be very significant as a transport mode. So for me, one of the concerns that I've had for a long time is the location of the stations. You've just provided a comprehensive statement as to why the option of the Drury West train station has been identified. I'm just wondering if for the record you could put up the options analysis and the scoring of the locations for the new stations in Drury West, as I think that before councillors vote on this matter, they need to understand that the option of the location of the station in Drury West actually wasn't the highest scoring option. The highest scoring option was a location west of what has been identified. It's one that I've supported, but it subsequently hasn't been recommended for inclusion. So can you just, even though I know that this council today is going to adopt the structure plan, do you have the table for scoring available, and can you provide that information for the record for councillors to be aware of?
Through the chair, that information was provided to the working party, but it isn't attached to the agenda. But Councillor Newman is correct. Of the 5 options that Chris mentioned, what we called options 1, 2 and 3 were the highest scoring. So options 1 and 2 were in this general vicinity here, and option 3 was more to the south and west of where we are recommending a centre. Option 3 did score marginally higher. So sorry, options 4 and 5 were further west again, moving right out towards the western extent of the structure plan area. So there were options 4 and 5 were definitely scored lowest in the multi-criteria analysis, and options 1, 2 and 3 scored higher. Under, I think, weighted and unweighted criteria, option 3 with the centre slightly further to the west did score marginally higher. So it was in this location here. However, on subsequent more detailed analysis, so we used the multi-criteria system to get a shortlist, 5 down to 3, and doing more detailed work, the benefits of the recommended centre outweighed the benefits of having a centre further west, which was the option 3. So yes, the first multi-criteria analysis, there was a slightly higher score for that option 3, but when you look into things in more detail and give weight to some of the matters that Chris talked about in terms of co-location of a viable, economically viable centre with a station, proximity to the industrial land, and a number of other aspects, this was the centre that was evaluated as the most appropriate overall.
Could you maybe outline with just a little bit more clarity with your pointer as to approximately where option 3 is? I think it is quite...
Option 3 is in this location. Option 3 is this location here, and it had the station shifted further to the west. So it's in that location there.
And so the option 2 location is approximately how far do you anticipate that would be from the likely location of the train station in Drury Village on the eastern side of the motorway? Is it approximately 1,200 metres?
Between this station here and the station here?
Yeah.
Just under 2 kilometres.
Okay.
Which, from the transport experts, is the most, or is an efficient separation of those two stations.
And part of the argument probably around the preferred option is the ability to leverage off a new town centre development in Drury West to help to fund some of that work.
So you might need to repeat that one again, Councillor.
Well, in terms of the benefits of the proposed location, in terms of being able to leverage off future developments to try and help fund and deliver that station, would that be one of the key arguments?
Not specifically. The whole question of funding of the transport network is part of that exercise that we're engaging with government on. So yes, there are a number of key private landowners in this area who potentially may contribute and should contribute to the costs of growth, the costs of the transport, but that specific issue wasn't given any weight. One of the factors that Chris did mention that made this location here, or the recommended location, come to the surface as the best location was the ability of the centre and the station to support the development that's already underway and the sort of northwestern part of Drury more generally, which is aligned with the Council's future urban land supply strategy, which earmarks this northwestern area here as the area that is in the first decade of growth and investment.
Thank you. Good. Councillor Sayers, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen. John, my question is just to gain a little bit more understanding around those elite soils and those primary soils. When I think your comment was around once the Falls is in place, those kind of pretty well lost those lands. So I've got two questions. I'll put them both to you. So the first question is, my understanding is that over, say, the last 10 years, it's been reported about 16% of those soils have been lost. Are you able to confirm that? But more importantly, with the percentage of soils we're about to potentially lose, how much more is there? I'm trying to get a total of that 16 plus something else equals a number. So that was question number one. And I'll give you question number two as well. In terms of the national policy statement that's been looked at by the government, does that mean potentially that those soils might be kind of the structure plan overridden and those soils potentially protected? Is that one of the ways that those national policy statements could be used?
Through Chair, unfortunately I don't have those figures to hand. I'd have to get them perhaps during the morning break. We've certainly done that analysis. We do have those key figures around the soils that have been developed over the last few years, the soils within the future urban areas and the soils outside of the RUB. But I really need the break to actually get that information to bring back to the committee.
That's okay, John. I just think, I'm sure, it's been topics and the market grows will be interesting. I think Aucklanders might be interested in even wider field. So if we could get that number, that would be terrific. And just about the national policy statement.
Again, I'm not close enough to the detail of that. My understanding is that there is certainly a discussion around areas that have been identified by a local authority for growth. Should they or shouldn't they be covered by the NPS is a topic that's under discussion with the Ministry. I don't know, Megan, if you've got any more information on that. Yeah.
Thank you. Member Namani, please.
Kia ora. I just... It's the planner in me, sorry. I just, in the report itself, it does talk about, like, you've looked at centres, and it talks about it's not necessarily written in stone as to how they're configured. Again, it's just layperson coming in fresh and not being part of the workshop. The rationale for different centres in such a small area, and then just a real simple, from my simple way of thinking, why wouldn't it be a priority to put your train station and your centres on the higher ground and not on the floodplains?
Well, certainly there's a hierarchy of centres proposed. I need that pointer.
It'd be good, can you just clarify for me what the hierarchy is?
Yeah. So in terms of, I mean, we see that as our main centre, and we see that as a western centre, slightly smaller, but there's also the kind of neighbourhood level ones down there, the local one there, and up around there as well, just north of the sort of floodplain. And there's a centre in the existing urban area, the Charles Mars Live zoning up there at the top of Bremner as well. And several, so if I missed any, Christopher, let me know, but certainly those smaller ones as well. So that's that hierarchy.
Can you talk to this slide as well, so that the mayor and...
Yes, it's not fair, is it? Yeah. Okay, so smaller centres there, those kind of local neighbourhood size ones, opportunities as the population grows upwards, if you like, and up Opaheki, and there was one, done that one, haven't I? So that's main centre there, kind of western centre serving the catchment. There's much talk around sort of the divide, the severance factor, which is the motorway, and that's servicing, that's the existing village, of course, so the existing urban area and a slightly bigger area to service the wider area, but also, you know, to service the local growing population in that western area as well. Catholic school site down there, which has a resource consent to develop, and they're pretty keen on doing so for a school and other uses. So that explains, I think, our hierarchy that we're proposing. Christopher, did you want to add some in-depth technical wisdom there?
So you talked about the floodplains and the streams and where the stations are in relation to those. Was that a question? So
It was,
Yep. So the railway track itself runs through Opaheki and comes down past the Drury village and then cuts across Drury West, and where it cuts through here it actually follows a low point in the topography. It's actually following a valley bottom more or less. So in this position here, it's in Drury West, it's actually almost impossible to find a place that doesn't have a stream nearby, and by stream I'm talking about tributaries of the Ngākoroa. So this place is actually outside the main floodplain of the Ngākoroa down here. This location here in Drury East is outside the main floodplain of the Hanaia stream. This floodplain runs down through here and meets the Slippery Creek area here. So there is a tributary of the Hanaia here, which I don't know the name of, and the station, which will be 220 metres long, will touch on that tributary at the southern end. The track already crosses that tributary, so that in effect will be modifying something that's already modified. Alternative positions were looked at. At one stage we looked at a position in here, and that was advocated by somebody, and we ruled that out because of the floodplain. This position in here was also advocated, and one of the problems with that is it is in the major floodplain of the Hanaia stream.
So in terms of the two main centres, hang on, go back, sorry. The two main centres, that's that kind of Flanagan Road up on a hill, really, overlooking that motorway area, overlooking Drury Village and the railway line below it, so that is higher. And over there's also tilted up as well. That's a sort of knob as you go past that Jesmond Road area, so that's high-ish as well. Nothing's very high in this area, but it's certainly out of the water there. So those are certainly factors in the location of the centres, staying away from the soggy bits.
Thank you, Member. Member Nuttman, do you have a supplementary? Thank you. Okay, it's moved by Deputy Mayor Cashmore. Deputy Mayor, did you want to say a few words about this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I'd like to acknowledge the team. And there's some more of the team sitting out the back there who put in endless hours with the consultation. I'd also like to acknowledge, it was Chairman Andy Baker in those days of the Franklin Local Board when they started off the area plan. And I was a brand spanking new local board member and didn't know a heck of a lot. But it's been an amazing process where the community, right from the day start, has been involved and engaged. And it's nothing too long to go to a jury hall. At the school hall there, one night I was told to go along there, might be 40 people to talk to, and there was over 300. The people are engaged, they're interested, they want to know what's happening. It's their land, their livelihood. And at the moment, they have been suffering from a legacy lack of asset delivery. And I would say it dates back 20 or more years, and particularly in the Drury area. And that legacy work has been worked on really very hard in this past term to get it brought forward. And I'm talking about electrification, extension of the motorway work, and Mill Road. And although we're not there yet, there's work being done between council and the government on delivering a set of agreed development packages that's going to facilitate this plan change. And that's a key point of it. The other lesson that's been well learnt is the Supporting Growth Alliance, which has been initiated by Auckland Council, and well done to all those involved in it, NZTA and AT. So everyone has a combined understanding. There's only one set of figures being used, and that from those figures, all factual plans and proposals can be based. And that's a huge step forward. Coming off that work has been work from the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education. And I know that Andy Baker's been well involved, particularly with the health stuff. Are we going to have new hospitals in Pukekohe and Drury, starting off as super clinics and then moving forward as the progression arrives at people? The extra thick end of 100,000 people that's going to move into this Franklin area won't all arrive at once. It will be over quite an extended time frame, and getting the planning around that time frame's absolutely critical. The other factor that is a real growth stimulus, and it goes back to the Franklin District Council, and their planning is about employment. So we're providing for quite a bit of employment land, but there's more happening than just this. There's private plan changes going ahead at Pukekohe around the racetrack. There's existing businesses in Pukekohe who are doubling and trebling the size of their operations. The notepads that I've had and discussions I've had tell me we are looking at between 15 and 25,000 jobs over the next 10 years. And potentially more than that going forward. The quality growing lands has been brought up, and it's been a real hot topic in the south because there is only one set of Pukekohe growing soils. Frost-free, volcanic, highly fertile, well understood and well known. What this council's done and the unitary plan has done is actually hard edge Pukekohe so it cannot grow into those elite soils and those primary growing soils. But probably equally as important, if not even more so, it has put up a series of barriers against reverse sensitivity around all rural production. And I'd like to compliment the team who did that work in the unitary plan, because that is absolutely critical. If we're going to help feed ourselves and a few other people offshore, we need to protect that rural production. The elite soils is one part, but the glass houses, the greenhouses, the horticultural production is a whole other set of requirements. The social infrastructure that goes along with the schools and hospitals is equally important, and I know our teams are working on that, and it will be put in place as we work our way forward. 34,500 dwellings is an estimate. That is, we are building a good-sized town down in Franklin. 64,000 was the population in 2010. 64,000. It's potentially going to be more than double that. The last point I'd like to bring up is the train stations. There's been a lot of pressure around that and some heat. One of the important things we need to remember is the developments are not all happening at once. And we are seeing some of the land on the west, which is bisected to the land in this private plan change on the east by a motorway and a railway, needing two separate stations. The eastern one is fairly logical in its current location. However, the western one is potentially more problematic. Now, when you think about the fact that the development of the smaller town centre that will be on the west will happen probably faster than anything else as far as the growth expectations are concerned, having a station that's linked to that town centre and the population growth that's expected through the future urban land supply strategy does make sense. Otherwise, you're potentially just going to have a station in a paddock outside of town, which does not make a lot of sense. This is the third stage of this development processes, and we now will be going down to the actual development plans with the property owners and the developers to come up with what will be the reality. I'd recommend and commend that we carry on with the alliance work with central government, with Kiwi Rail, with NZTA, so we get a all-comprehensive delivery of something that's great, where it's live, work, play, where there's great connectivity, great public transport and great recreational spaces. That is achievable. We can have a 30-year vision. We just need to have those who are around us, particularly central government, to join in with that vision with the right amount of funding, planning and enthusiasm. Mr Chair, thank you for your work in chairing and leading this, and again my appreciation most sincerely to the staff and the members of the subcommittee who put the hard yards in. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Newman, please.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I want to compliment the officers for what has been a very long and I think quite a forensic piece of work. I think that a lot of very good analysis has gone into informing the conversations leading to the recommendations for the structure plan, and I'm generally there about most of it, but with the notable exception of the location of the centre in Drury West. It pains me to say that because it means that I need to record that I won't be on with you on A, and I'd like that to be recorded. One of the reasons why I supported the Oranga development going ahead of others in relation to the future urban land supply strategy, I need to declare this. The reason why I supported that is it enabled the headworks, which is very important to providing bulk water into Hengaia. Very important because Hengaia, without the headworks from the south, it really constrains the ability to provide potable water into that location. And my predecessor was very determined to get Hengaia live zoned, but in the absence of providing that water infrastructure to it, I mean, you really can't do much with a live zoned land that you can't service with water. So that's the reason why I supported that. But I've always had a concern about what happens in the Drury area, sequencing what goes first. And I need to say that I've actually have some real sympathy for the development of the Kiwi Income property site at Drury South. My expectation will be that we will almost certainly see Clive Mackenzie and Douglas Allen file their private plan change request shortly, and we will have to respond to that. The officers know that, and we will have to address that on the merits of the application. I'm sure that John Duguid and his team have got a lot of people on standby to manage what is coming. There's a big avalanche of work coming. My concern, Mr Chair, has been around the location of the centres, and it is around the location of the stations to support that. I, hand on heart, am of the view that option 3 was the better option. I was plainly disappointed when this matter came up for conversation at the Structure Plan Working Party. I think that the scoring was fair. I think that the scoring was actually a little bit definitive in relation to some key criteria, but we're not going with option 3. We're going with something else. I think that to put the station in the approximate location where the new secondary school needs to be built would have been a better option at Drury West. But I do understand that that there is a debate that is taking place at this point. It's a debate that will take place, and there is still some work to go in terms of the precise location, the design of this area. And so that there is an ongoing conversation to be had, and maybe things might change slightly in the future. And so I support the officers leading that discussion, because I think it will be a discussion which will be largely negotiated with entities that are going to be investing in this location. But I do want to state that I think that the location of the stations is not optimal. And for that reason, I've expressed my view. But I do want to thank the staff once again, because I know the complexity of trying to play the harp to herd the cats. It is not an easy exercise, and you have done, I think, a good job under difficult circumstances with all the competing interests that apply.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. Others want to contribute to this finally? Look, just around it then, again, I think the Deputy Mayor has voiced our deep gratitude to the teams. John, your whole team, if you can make sure that, I'm sure you will, take it back to the whole team. We've got a number of other staff that have supported this over several years. I've acknowledged the board, and so too as Deputy Mayor. But this has been a big task. Craig, you've been charged with being the face of it, but Christopher, Joy, all of you, just tremendous work. What comes out of this has to be a very different place to how we've created places that maybe look like this on paper that we've come across in the past. I am not defeatist when I say we must lead this by public transport and rapid transit. That it is not an option. It is just not an option that we create a motoring mortgage for thousands of people down here, because that creates a mortgage to all of us right across Auckland. It is not the communities of the future. And so we're going to have to stay on course. And there's been some discussion about railway stations, not about an interchange, not so much about roads anymore, and though we did have some discussions about the expressway and Mill Road, but isn't it great to have so much contest around the idea of where the train stations are located? And we've landed at a point now, and there's more work to be done. And it's great to hear the staff acknowledge that there's more work to be done. And we could shift it west, shift it east, shift it west towards a school, and you shift it away from the centre, and you shift it away from the industry zone, which is a 500, 800 metre walk across a watery environment. We'll bridge it. So there's pros and cons. I've examined this really hard as well. I'm not going to let one element get in the way of me adopting it here today, or lending my vote to adopting it. But there is a great opportunity as we lead into the plan change work to stay the course. This is going to be a high quality living environment, working environment, being environment for our people. It is a very watery environment. There is water everywhere, be it fresh or marine. Let's celebrate that and bring our people to the water in the designs. I've got a lot of confidence in the major players that we've all met and their plans for down there. One is coming out of a model that will not be repeated there. That is the Sylvia Park investment of that investor, where there's 5,000 plus 2,000 car parks. That centre will not have anywhere near that car dependency. And we're going to have to, and this is probably my opportunity to tell our planning team that we need to stay on course as we go to the next stages, that we are not backing away. This has to be an exemplar that unfolds here. It can be not just another unfolding of Auckland. So with that, members, I commend this to have your support, and we adopt it, and the Franklin Local Board right and behind it. and we'll put it to the vote. I'll put it together. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. And declare that carried, and I'll record.
Inundation and station protection.
We don't record the detail. We just
I'm
record.
just recording it to the camera.
That's nice. It's good of you to perform today. Thank you. It's carried. I've recorded that, and 2 votes. The staff will record that. John, thank you. Craig, thank you. Joy, Christopher. I think it's time to take a 10-minute adjournment.